and all the homework. So
Okay, so let me share my screen.
yeah.
I'm still a little fumbling with yeah. Okay. So this is our 14th discussion, and we'll start with a little bit about the author John Steinbeck, and two of his books were banned, so we'll have a look at that and about his entire Nobel Prize winning fiasco. And we'll also see about East of Eden. And there's a lot of very interesting points to discuss and also very interesting quotes. In fact, I stopped about some midway through. I stopped. I thought if I add any more quotes, the presentation is just not going to end. There's actually the entire book, there's so much really noteworthy stanzas and discussions. Okay. So, starting with Steinbeck, the American author, he won his Nobel Prize in Literature in 1962. His most popular book and the best selling one was The Grapes of Wrath, which won the National Book Award and also the Pulitzer Prize. Most of his stories are based in Central California, and they are particularly in the Salinas Valley and the California coast ranges. Uh, Usually the themes that he explores and in most of the stories and the short stories are about fate and injustice, and all his characters are usually poor and everyday characters, simple characters, people who are in the military and farmers, etc. So twice his books were banned, both The Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden. There was a lot of opposition for his books in California, and especially in this Kern County. The reasons stated were that, of course, there's a lot of, the profanity, and it shows shows a very rugged and a very they felt an uncivilized picture of California, which they felt is not true. And also the fact that as far as East of Eden is concerned, they felt that, the whole thing of showing Kathy as a prostitute, and also they felt the entire way in which the county has been shown is not the right representation of how it was. So there were public gatherings held, and there were copies of the book burned also. Um, what did Steinbeck think about all this? So this is what he says: the vilification of me out here from the large landowners and bankers is pretty bad. The latest is a rumor started by them that the Okies hate me. Okies are the people from Oklahoma, and have threatened to kill me for lying about them. I'm frightened at the rolling might of this damn thing. It is completely out of hand. I mean, a kind of hysteria about the book is growing that is not healthy. So, in fact, the entire thing of his books being banned, and the kind of the how he was portrayed and among the public in California had him very worried. But I think it's in about 1941 or something, this ban was removed, and finally, he could heave a sigh of relief, I guess. Then came his other problem. So what happened was, in 1962, he won the Nobel Prize. So there was a huge outcry over this. The Nobel Prize Committee mentioned that Steinbeck won it for his realistic and imaginative writing, combining as it does sympathetic humor and keen social perception, which I think is perfectly true when it comes to East of Eden too. However, this whole thing that the awarding of the Nobel Prize to him was heavily criticized. They felt he doesn't deserve it. So when it was announced that he's won it, the next day, a Swedish newspaper mentioned that this was one of the Academy's biggest mistakes. And if we think that this is how Sweden probably reacted to it, it's not going to be in New York. America wouldn't be doing this. we are wrong. This was something which appeared in the New York Times. So why the Nobel Committee gave the award to an author whose limited talent is in his best books, watered down by 10th rate philosophizing, noting that the international character of the award and the weight attached to it raise questions about the mechanics of selection and how close the Nobel Committee is to the main currents of American writing. So even the New York Times heavily criticized, the fact that Steinbeck won the Nobel Prize. To make matters worse, I think it was I think it was after the lifetime of Steinbeck, but there were some papers, released by the Nobel Committee. Some of their own personal papers were made public, where there is some kind of a memo or a discussion between the judges where they talk about how there's actually nobody else, worthy of this award in that particular year, and that they had no choice. He was the best among the worst, or something like that is mentioned in that memo, which adds even more to the whole thing, which I don't know. I felt it was quite unfair to do that to him. But Steinbeck was terribly upset about all this outcry. So he did not publish any more fiction after winning the Nobel Prize. He lived for another 6 years, but he did not write any fiction in that period. So was this true? Is what I wanted to, analyze next, because Grapes of Wrath is considered as one of his best works. So I remember reading an interview by Salman Rushdie, where he talks about how whatever he writes is not compared with other authors, but it's compared with what he's written before. So Midnight's Children won the Booker of Bookers, but to do another Midnight's Children might not be possible for Rushdie. But at the same time, though he writes excellently and though he writes great books, but always it's compared with Midnight's Children, and probably because of that, maybe it doesn't reach that level, so it doesn't get the kind of recognition that it deserves. So maybe this is what happened with Steinbeck. I don't know. It could be a reason, but there is another incident which is mentioned as the incident which changed Steinbeck, and after which he did write at the level in which he was writing before. So I just wanted to mention that incident with you. So this is a picture of Ed Ricketts. So Ed Ricketts is this American marine biologist and a philosopher. He's one of those initial marine biologists who used to go out into the sea, collect specimens. He used to sell those specimens, experiment. He had his own lab. And basically he was this wonderful character who was a very deep thinker. And he and Steinbeck shared a very special friendship. He strongly influenced Steinbeck's writing, and Steinbeck's works were initial works, and also whatever he wrote, initially he shared it with Ricketts, and they had a very close bond with each other. In their circle, other two people were Henry Miller and Joseph Campbell too. So Joseph Campbell, I think many of you must have heard of the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. You must have heard about the concept of the hero's journey. It's especially very popular with writers. And so it's the same Joseph Campbell. So he and Henry Miller were also a part of this circle. And
that's the formula for most fiction. The protagonist is like this.
Yeah. So Ed Ricketts was not much in the public eye as what Henry Miller or Steinbeck were, but he became very popular after Steinbeck wrote Cannery Row, in which one of the characters is called Doc, and Steinbeck mentioned in public that this person Doc was based on Ed Ricketts, and that made Ed Ricketts very popular, and there were a lot of people interviewed him, and they were trying to find out who is this person on whom Steinbeck has written about and all this stuff. So that's how Ricketts became very famous. In fact, Henry Miller has also written a novel in which he has based a character on Ricketts. And Joseph Campbell has also written a novel in which he based a character on Ricketts. But Joseph Campbell did not publish his novel, while Henry Miller did. So all this actually added to Ricketts' popularity. But sadly, what happened was Ricketts' car was suddenly hit by a train, and he was badly injured in the accident. He was After the accident, he was alive for about some 3 days or something before he died, and Steinbeck literally rushed to be with him and see his friend before he could die. But before Steinbeck could reach, Ricketts had passed away. And after this, this completely affected Steinbeck. And when he came back home, as soon as he reached home, the first thing that his wife told him is that she wants a divorce. So this was like a hit upon a hit for him. And that the entire next nearly one whole year, it said that Steinbeck was in complete depression. And after that, whatever he wrote after that period of time wasn't as good as what he had written before. Now, I'm not sure how far that's true, because after that is what he wrote East of Eden. And I'm definitely sure you would agree with me that East of Eden was definitely good to read. Okay, so this is again another article which New York Times published on the day after Steinbeck's death. So after Steinbeck passed away, this was an article which appeared in the very next day. So John Steinbeck's first great book was his last great book. But good Lord, what a book that was and is, The Grapes of Wrath. This is what Charles Poor had mentioned in New York Times. The criticism which he mentions there is that the preachiness in Steinbeck's work, as if half his literary inheritance came from the best of Mark Twain and the other half from the worst of Cotton Mather. So Cotton Mather is this, Christian minister who had written a lot of, work. He'd published a lot of books which were considered extremely preachy, and he wasn't very popular, in fact. So, and in fact, Cotton Mather is also very well known to the public for the reason that he justified the Salem witch trials. So that was another reason why he's very known among the people. So he says the best of Mark Twain and the worst of Cotton Mather are what comes together in Steinbeck's writing. Okay, so another interesting thing is that Steinbeck's always used, this symbol, this logo, whenever he signed letters. It's called as a Pegasus, and this was the exact logo which he used. A Pegasus is a pig with wings. So, and he had these wordings, Ad astra per alia porsi, which meant to the stars on the wings of a pig. So it is basically, the symbol is meant to show that, he's a very earthbound but an aspiring person, but he does not have enough wings spread, but he has a lot of intention. Very interesting, I felt. Okay, so before we go to, East of Eden, maybe I'll just stop the screen share, and if anyone has anything interesting to say, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Grapes of Wrath I read long time ago, madam. Joad family, etc.
Oh, is it as good as what everyone seems to be saying?
So it is better than this East of Eden. That's what I feel.
Oh,
Because you get involved in that characters for that matter. And the mother of Joad, actually, she really inspired. In extremely bad situation, actually, how the family gets migrated to another place, because it is taken to be golden ball, dust ball, and then there was gold and other things. They go away, leaving their own. These corporate people, they try to snatch away the land. They will be landless. They will be forced to go. And during this period of journey, how much they suffer. They fall sick. Some of their members die, and other things actually.
oh,
Actually, more than this East of Eden, Grapes of Wrath was the book actually. Definitely stands better there. As far as I feel that way. This book is also different thing. I read it long time ago, but this was chosen to be for the discussion. I recollected immediately. These are the only two books I read as at the moment. That was earlier was Grapes of Earth, and now this one. That is also a good book actually, and it is also a huge book, like the.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Nidhi.
Hi, Archana. Sorry I'm late.
No, it's okay. No problem. Okay, so shall I continue with the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. So we just saw about, since Nidhi, you joined late, you just missed the portion about Steenbeck. I'm going to now start with the book.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'll just listen in. Thank you.
Sure, sure. So East of Eden, according to Steenbeck, he considered it as his greatest novel. He used the words magnum opus, in fact. And it has, this is what he says about his book. So it has everything in it I have been able to learn about my craft or profession in all these years. I think everything else I have written has been, in a sense, practice for this. His main intention of writing the book was that he wanted both of his sons, who were, I think, 6.5 and 4.5 years at the point of when he wrote East of Eden, he wanted them to know about where they came from and what kind of a family and what kind of a lineage they came from. And that was his main intention of writing the book. So I finished my book a week ago, much the longest and surely the most difficult work I have ever done. I have put all the things I have wanted to write all my life. This is the book. If it is not good, I have fooled myself all the time. I don't mean I will stop, but this is a definite milestone and I feel released. Having done this, I can do anything I want. Always I had this book waiting to be written. So the Hamilton family in the novel is based upon the real life family of Samuel Hamilton, who was Steenbeck's maternal grandfather. And young John Steenbeck also appears as a minor character. You must have realized that at one or two places where he mentions his mother. In fact, there's that entire scene of his mother flying on an aeroplane. And it's so funny. It seems that the editor of the book wanted to know, why have you even included this scene, over here? Why is your mother in a plane? How does this anyway tie to the story? There's no, reason for this scene to be here. So Steenbeck just said, no, I just want it there. That's all. And it's going to remain. And it did remain, I guess. So I think he mainly wrote the book for his children. He wanted his children to know about Salinas Valley. He wanted them to know about the Hamilton family, about Samuel Hamilton, about the entire, how they were and they had come up. And he wanted another contrasting. Of course, he wanted it to be a novel, so there has to be more interesting characters. You cannot have only the good and the goody characters alone. So I guess that's why he also thought about the Trask family, and he wanted a contrast over there. He also wanted to show how the Hamiltons are viewed in the eyes of another family. So, which is how the Trask family also comes into the picture. So the main themes of the book are about depravity, beneficence, love, struggle for acceptance, greatness, the capacity for self-destruction, of guilt, of freedom. And more than anything else, I think he wanted to show the contrast between good and evil, and also how both can be present in the same person. The inspiration for the book is the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is the book which speaks about creation, the story of creation in the Bible. And this story is especially based on the story of Cain and Abel. So just for a little bit, I'm not sure if all of you know about this. So just for a little idea of what is Cain and Abel. So Cain and Abel are considered as our brothers. They are the sons of Adam, the first man. And so they're considered like the sons of God. And Cain, Cain, I think, is the person who's a sheep rearer, while Abel is the person who is a farmer. And both of them give a gift to God. While God accepts Abel's gift, he doesn't accept or he doesn't care much about Cain's gift. So this makes Cain very jealous. So Cain kills Abel out of the jealousy. And in fact, there's this scene in the Bible where after killing Abel, he comes to God and God asks him, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So this same sentence can be found in when Adam asks, why am I not remembering the name?
Aaron.
Cal.
Yeah,
Cal,
sorry.
Cal.
Cal. So he asks Cal,
About Aaron.
"Where is your brother? Where's Aaron?" And then he says, "Am I responsible for him? Am I supposed to take care of him?" Or something like that. He mentions that. So there's a lot of parallels with Cain and Abel. And in fact, the whole thing also repeats itself twice. The entire Cain and Abel scenario repeats itself twice in the book. With initially with Adam and Charles, and then again with Aaron and Cal. So and why is the book called East of Eden? The story of Cain and Abel in the Bible, the last sentence comes as, "And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." So this is how it ends. So that's where he got the name East of Eden for the novel. So I just found this chart, which was very interesting, about how the whole Cain and Abel and Charles and Adam and Caleb and Aaron. So all the three are playing out in the same way, where Cain is a tiller of the land. Same is with Charles, who's a farmer. Same is with Caleb, who invests money and he grows bean cobs. And again, God rejects Cain's gifts. Same here, he prefers Adam's gift, some stray puppy, over Charles' gift, which is an expensive knife. Again, the same thing, Adam rejects Cal's money and he says that, "I would rather that you led a very good and respectable life like Aaron." And same, again, Cain kills Abel. Here, Charles attacks Adam. He beats him nearly to death, but he doesn't kill him. He manages to escape. And same with Caleb also here. Caleb doesn't exactly kill him, but he tells him about the truth about the mother, which is what makes Aaron enlist himself in the war, and he's killed in combat. Same here again, God puts a mark on Cain so that, it's like branding him or something like that. I'm not very sure about this thing. So here also we have the scenario where Charles gets a very deep scar on his forehead, which keeps getting darker and darker. And the same here, they describe Caleb as more dark and sinister in appearance when compared to Aaron, who's described as more, beautiful and all that. And in the book also, Book of Genesis, Abel doesn't have any child. So here, Cain is the one who has a child. Here, though Adam has a child, it's hinted as if the children could have been Charles and not Adam's. And here again, it's Caleb. Aaron dies in the war. It's Caleb who's going to be able to carry on and have children in future. So there's a lot of parallel between these, between these three characters. And even naming Adam, even the name C and A keeps repeating. And here, Charles and Adam is purposely named as Adam so that on the first half, he takes the role of Abel. But in the next half, he becomes Adam, the first man. And his children become Cain and Abel, Caleb and Aaron. So that's how the whole thing was planned by Steinbeck. So before we go to the discussion topics, I think if anyone wants to add anything else, then Did you know about this book of Genesis thing before we saw here?
Yeah, I did. I
Oh,
watched
great.
Lucifer. So
Ah.
I knew Cain and Abel and the whole story. I knew that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about this, so it was quite a surprise. And it was so well brought out, I think, the
Yeah,
kind of
brought it up.
parallels.
Yep,
Yeah,
very well.
very well brought out. Okay.
May I?
Yes, please.
This tabular presentation of parallels between the book of Genesis, East of Eden, that is Charles Adam, and Caleb and Aaron is brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really brilliant. That is drawing in a tabular form, it immediately attracts attention. Actually. That is one good.
Yes.
But in the last column, there was one word, Timshel. We are not discussed about that.
Yeah. So that was exactly the discussion point. The first one was Timshel.
Have you kept it for subsequent slide?
Yes. It's the night now. The next slide is about Timshel.
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So the last word of the novel is Timshel, and the whole, I think the most important theme of the entire book is actually this word Timshel. Are people born good or evil? And do people make their own destiny? So according to, Steinbeck, the one thing which he wanted to really focus upon in the main theme of the book is nature versus nurture. So for instance, Kathy, why is Kathy so evil? There is actually no reasoning for it. It's not like, usually in our movies, we have something which happened to them in their childhood or something which makes them evil, or they go out for vengeance or revenge or something. There's absolutely nothing, no reason for her to be evil. It's not even that she was born to someone who was very evil or something. Again, there was nothing like that. So right from the childhood, she's shown as a person who lies and who schemes. She drives a man to suicide just because she can. And also we see how she collects evidence about all the important people in the society just to blackmail them, though she doesn't have any intention of actually blackmailing them. She just wants to keep it ready if in case she wants to do something. And when it comes to Caleb, we feel that he has his own feeling that he is wicked. And once he meets his mother, he tries to justify, okay, this is the reason why I have those wicked feelings within me. And he often, because Aaron is his, twin brother, there's always that comparison that he draws between himself and Aaron. And he sees Aaron as this perfect and pure and absolutely stainless character. So all the more reason, maybe what he feels, whatever his thoughts are, may not really be so wicked. But when he compares himself to Aaron, who's this perfect character, he feels that, okay, maybe I am wicked. And then when he meets his mother, he realizes, oh, okay, so maybe I went after my mother. Maybe my mother's blood runs in me, and which is why I am wicked. He tries to justify his behavior. Now, do we really have a choice? Can we change fate? Steinbeck states that we must try to break free of those chains, and you must not accept it meekly. So he says that sometimes maybe we don't have a choice. Sometimes maybe we cannot change fate. But it's said that the main theme of the novel is that maybe you can't change it, but you cannot accept it also meekly. You must try to at least make the effort to break free from those chains. So when coming back to Timshel, Timshel is a Jewish word, and there's a huge, long discussion which happens between Lee and I think Hamilton is also there, and Adam is also there, where they discuss about the translation of Timshel in various translations, biblical translations of Timshel. And so basically, he says, Timshel, when you translate it as, you shall, there are various different verbs which are being used. So he says that most of the Bibles translate it as you shall. When you say you shall do this, then what happens is it sounds as if it's part of a plan. it sounds as if there's already a decision made. It's a fate which has been written and given to that person, and he doesn't have any choice in it. He doesn't have a free will towards it. So it's a part of a plan. You shall do that. So again, there's no choice over there. Second translation which is there is that you must do this. So again, when you say you must do so and so thing, once again that it becomes that there's no choice over there. You have to follow this path. This is the path which has been laid out for you. Now, the interesting thing is that Lee says that both these translations are wrong. He says that the actual translation should be you may. So when you say you may, then that says you have a choice. You may do so and so thing. That means you have a choice to prevail over the sin, to stop the evil and go on the right path. So there's always a struggle between, whether free will and determinism, which is the, whether everything is just what is there in fate or whether we have free will. So this is where Lee says you may means you may do this or you may not do this. So that the word timshil is an advice which is finally in the last word which is given. And it's not just an advice by Adam to his son Caleb, but it's also to the reader. In fact, it's said that whatever he wanted to say to Caleb, he said it, through his expressions, he has forgiven him. But the word timshil finally is actually meant for the reader. It's to say, you may choose the right path. So now another very interesting thing about this word timshil is that there is a particular scholar who has researched about this, and he says that there's no word called timshil in Jewish language. So, so he says that it's actually timshol or timshu or something like that. It's another word.
Timoshel, I think.
Timoshel,
Timoshel.
or something. Yeah. So it's a different word. And I think he's also written some research paper or something on why Steinbeck purposely chose it as timshel instead of Timoshel or something like that. So I think
He
that's,
says it
I didn't
mean you may.
Yeah,
He
it
doesn't
doesn't
mean that.
exactly. There's something about it. But I think he also goes on further. There's a paper or something. Is it a book? I don't know. He wrote, which says why Steinbeck chose timshel or something
That
like
part
that.
I didn't read. I found this somewhere, and I was like, this whole book is based on that, and how could he do this? So that I didn't get. That I think we need to read more. Why Steinbeck chose to.
Yeah. Even I didn't have the patience to go into it fully, so I just stopped with that. I was like, oh, okay, this whole thing is based on timshel and it's not there as a word. Oh, okay. Okay, so the next interesting thing I wanted to...
May
Yes,
I put
sir.
few words here, madam?
Sure, please. I'll just... You want me to stop the screen share?
Let us keep it here actually.
Okay, sure.
As you rightly said, this book is allegorical and it explores on moral and ethical values.
Correct.
So that is between good and evil. And there is an important paragraph by Steinbeck actually, chapter 34 actually.
Mm-hmm.
Then he brought in the human nature and other things. It is a lengthy paragraph. I shall not read it. But anyway, what he says is between good and evil, the idea of a free choice that is as encapsulated in this Hebrew or Jewish word which is said, timshel, matters. This literally means thou mayest. You have given the third point also. You may or thou mayest. That is what he said. So this gives us a choice on how to live our lives. And that choice is what gives each of our lives value. And this word, as you just said, it appears that Cain and Abel also in the Bible, actually. That one particular translation. Another beautiful thing is actually, as we understand, this is a biblical word or reference. But if you get into the book, actually, it got by those Chinese philosophers with the Lee's help. They investigate and they find out and they bring out this meaning as you mayest. We do not know whether it is theoretical or practical. That means, is it that actually this Eastern philosophy has affected this interpretation of the word as you may, Instead of, as you said, you shall and you must, you may. You may leave us a choice, either good or bad. It gives us a choice. That is the
Correct.
point. But those people, but there is a point here. Let us put actually one belief is already, it is predetermined, my fate or my destiny. They may find this concept actually it is disconcerting. And they also say it is absurd because it's already predestined. How come actually I am left with the choice to choose between good or evil, good or bad, or right or wrong, whatever that is. That is one point we have to see.
Right.
Another interpretation I found in the book was the important choice that is highlighted in the story is to see oneself as one's best self. That means the choice also you have to apply to yourself, and you have to see that yourself as the best self. And you have to look past what's the shortcomings and flaws, and to love all the things that are good about one's own self. That's what in another book I found, a small write-up. And this, as you just said, it is a choice for not only for Cal, even for all of us.
Correct.
Making a choice of good and pushing on in our life definitely helps all of us.
Correct.
Predetermined things and other things are different, but once you practically feel this is the better choice, and this is what helps me in nurturing my personality, we can follow this. That's what I feel. Simple is a word. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There was a story which I of a relative of mine, a very old person. I'm talking about maybe 70, 80 years ago, where he was in his, he was 16 years or something. And I think they had that PSC exam or something they have, right? Instead of the grade 12 board exams, that time the PSC, something like that we used to have. So he had gone to an astrologer to ask him, what mark I would score. So the astrologer told him, you are going to fail the exam. So considering that he's going to anyway fail the exam, he didn't go to school, he didn't study, he didn't write the exam also. So it's a story very popularly told in my family about this particular person who did this. So maybe Timshel was meant for people like him.
Exactly. And the paragraph which I was referring to from chapter 34, I have posted in this chat box actually. That's what our Chirbeck has written.
Oh.
One has to find, last sentence is really good. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will he have left only the hard, clean question, was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? That is what he answered.
Correct. Right. Perfect. Okay, I'll proceed with the next point of discussion.
Please.
Yeah. So one more thing very interesting over here is the repetition. So the entire experience, the entire story of Cain and Abel plays out between Charles and Adam. And once again, it plays out between Caleb and Aaron. So the whole thing has been done, especially because to show how human experience actually just repeats itself. And it's not only the fight between Cyrus and Adam and Caleb and Aaron. There are so many things, so many parallels between the characters. For instance, Adam, though he seems such a wonderful person and everything, he also ends up favoring one child over another. He sees what Cyrus favoring Cyrus favoring Adam over Charles, what it has done to Charles, how much it has affected him. He sees that. But again, he repeats the same thing. He does the same thing to his own children. Once again, with Cyrus, Adam and Aaron, all of them are wanderers who just joined the army because they have no direction. They don't know what they want to do. And even there's a lot of parallels between Caleb, Charles, and Kathy. All of them are fueled by jealousy. Kathy, maybe I can't say really not just jealousy, she's purely evil too. But all three of them, they earn a lot of money, but they don't even enjoy it. They don't even have any big plans for it or something. They just need to earn money just for the sake of it. So Adam, once again, Adam is, as I said, he's Abel in the first half, and then he becomes his namesake Adam in the second half of the novel. So what Steinbeck is trying to say with this whole thing is that what is happening now has happened before and it will happen again. I think it's just like what we say, history repeats itself as we see time and again. So after this, I think I don't have anything else with the discussion points. I just had a few quotes, but I'll share the quotes, but I have not taken up all the quotes. In fact, more and more, I just kept, the more and more I went, the quotes were just happening more and more. So I just stopped myself. So in case there's something which any of you would like to share, you can put it in the chat box. Then we can read it out later. Okay, so the first one which I had is that the Timshel quote. So it set him free, said Lee. It gave him the right to be a man, separate from every other man. That's lonely. All great and precious things are lonely. I thought this line was also very beautiful. All great and precious things are lonely. What is the word again? Timshel, thou mayest. But the Hebrew word, the word Timshel, thou mayest, that gives a choice. It might be the most important word in the world. That says the way is open, that throws it right back on a man. For if thou mayest, it's also true that thou mayest not. And this, I believe, that the free, exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for. The freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. And this I must fight against. Any idea, religion, or government which limits or destroys the individual. This is what I am and what I am about. I thought this particular, stanza is so important for what we are living right now in the current situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, this exactly says about why it should be a democracy kind of a thing. You cannot accept any dictatorship or communism and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the thing.
True. The freedom of the individual mind, to decide for itself.
Exactly. And it's written, all beautiful things like a artist and a novel, everything, music, everything is created by an individual. It is
Correct.
never a collective effort. I mean, it's there in that same
True.
paragraph. It's
Yes.
there. Yeah.
But I also think that this is a very typical American sentiment.
Okay.
Because it's about individualism, right? And
Yeah.
American society stands for it. And that's why people choose to not wear masks or
Yeah.
protest.
Yeah.
Not wear masks when everyone else. So
Yeah.
this is a very, very typical American sentiment.
Yeah.
Enshrined in their constitution and literature.
Yeah, that's true, but but maybe not always, right, Ranjini? Especially with the masks, we can see that.
No, what I mean is, they always, I don't know what, Fifth Amendment or something. There's something that they always pull it. Yeah, what I in the American shows, right?
Yeah.
Since I lived there in the US as a young person, it's a very empowering thought because it's all pervasive that individual has the freedom to decide every single thing. No one should be told. Any child can grow up to be president. All this is part of the water and the air. And even if you go as an immigrant, you will imbibe this because it's pervasive. So it's like, it is, it's like meritocracy taken to the extreme. A belief that everyone is given equal choice, which means everyone should be equally successful.
Correct.
It is very, very empowering.
Yeah.
It doesn't always apply. And sometimes it's a fight for the fight's sake. For the right of the individual, you keep fighting.
Correct.
Even if it is detrimental sometimes. So, but
I think
control, right? The right to bear arms. It's written in the Constitution. This was written when they were living with animals. Now there are people who the lobby is so strong. The gun lobby is so strong. Even if you show statistics, they are not going to believe the stats. No, like our forefathers told us we could bear arms, so we're going to bear arms to protect us.
Now it's the animals who are having the arms.
Well, yeah. So basically, sometimes, so I think because American literature is also so popular across the world, many of the ideas, especially when they're conveyed very well, it becomes accepted. I mean, I'm a big fan of my time in the US, and I've been influenced greatly by living there. But now that I'm out of it and I have spent equal number of years outside the US as I did within the US, I see that it's not always true. Like, the ideas need to be seen in the context of society. It needs to be context of the time. And I guess maybe my worldview has increased beyond the
Yeah, what I read this as was, Ranjini, when you mention all this, I understand from where this passage comes. But when I read it, I was thinking about how, always there is, if someone speaks which is against the popular, whatever opinion is there in the community, then there's always all these voices which come up to put them down. There's
நீ தேடின பேக் கிடைச்சிருச்சா?
1 minute, I think.
நீ இப்படி ஷோல்டர்ல
somebody has to be.
காமிச்சில.
Okay. Yeah. So this was my feeling that, maybe some of the, whatever, as an individual, anyone who has a different thought, maybe anyone who questions let's say a religious idol or something is there, or a religious figure is there, especially in today's very volatile situation, if you question anything which is against the government or which is against the religion or anything, you're immediately thrown into the prison or something. So I think that's something which you need to fight against. Maybe the thought may not be a right one, or it may be a right one. Whatever it is, it's fine, but the person must have the freedom to have that thought, which is what I read this as.
Yeah, I think at that base level, that's true. So, for example, like, since I studied in the US, you are free to argue with the professor. There is no hierarchy. From a young age, you can question. You can take the argument till you wear yourselves out, or the argument out. So there is nothing against the student for asking a question which the professor is not able to answer. They are quite willing to engage in, and those were very, very empowering concepts, that there was no hierarchy. There was, that everyone is taken at face value. And yeah, that is true. You can have an opinion which is against the majority opinion.
Right.
And in many ways, I think just knowing that you can do that, or that you can say that, itself is very, very empowering. But again, like, if you say, right, if you take it to today and you say that end of the day, US is a country where there are only two political parties, right? So if really everyone is able to have their opinion and go through each of these words that to say, any idea, any religion, any government, there is not that much room. So yeah, but it is, like I said, it is very empowering to know that you can be an immigrant student from another country, and you can stand up and challenge the professor emeritus. They will not rusticate you from the school for doing that. Because they feel that, we learn, we grow, we learn in debate. So yeah, those are very, very freeing concepts. I agree.
True. Okay, so this is another quote. I believe there is one story in the world, and only one. Humans are caught in their lives, in their thoughts, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. There is no other story. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean questions. Was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? I think, Shamal Ravji, this was the paragraph you mentioned, right?
Thank you. This was the paragraph. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. I think this was also very nice.
Yes.
This was my favorite quote. I love that one.
Yeah, it speaks so much in so little words,
Yeah.
I believe a strong woman may be stronger than a man, particularly if she happens to have love in her heart. I guess a loving woman is indestructible. do you take pride in your hurt? Again, this was, I think, so true. Most of us, at least with me, we love to wallow in our own hurt and sorrow. So with me especially. So it's like a good question. Do you take pride in your hurt? Does it make you seem large and tragic? Well, think about it. Maybe you're playing a part on a great stage with only yourself as audience. We have only one story. All novels, all poetry are built on the never-ending contest in ourselves of good and evil. And it occurs to me that evil must constantly respawn, while virtue is immortal. Vice has always a new, fresh, young face, while virtue is venerable as nothing else in the world is. I don't know when I felt very, I would say, I could relate a lot to this quote because if you just look at the number of, I would say, crime novels, crime thrillers and crime novels and the movies, and every time I always have this feeling that maybe anything and every possible aspect of crime has already been done, but then something new would come up which would be completely different, which we have never seen before, and a completely new aspect and a new way on which whatever kind of crime is being committed. So I guess vice as always of a new, fresh, young face, while virtue is venerable as nothing else in the world is. I could think of this from the point of view of all these stories, whichever I've read and whichever I've watched. That's it.
I have a point here, madam.
Yes. Please.
Last time during the course of discussion, at the end, TPS actually, you have shown us another book, Journal of a Novel.
Yes.
That you have left out in your presentation. I thought you will be hitting it big.
I didn't go into it a lot deep, but it was very interesting. Very interesting to read. But I thought maybe, not all of us here are writers. So I thought maybe it may not be so interesting to everyone. So that's why I didn't talk about it much.
And once you have followed it up with 2 emails, actually, I thought the book must be having something in it. So what I did was I read the book actually.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic.
I must thank you for that, because the way I understand is actually reading is normally 2-dimensional. Reader on one side and the book on the other side. But once you put your hand on this particular book, Journal of a Novel, writer comes into picture.
Correct.
In a sense, actually, what he says is why he wrote the book. That is, you are privileged to the author's mind when he wrote the book.
Correct.
We will get to know the dynamics of writing and his intention in character and context build up, his love and hate for certain characters. He has openly said, I don't understand this. Though he has written about her or him, actually, he says, I don't understand him. And the book is going out of my hands like that. His intention in character and context build up, his love and hate for certain characters, his expectations on success or failure of the book. And his love and what treasure different types of readers can gain once he reads the book. He creates 3 groups of readers, and each group of readers actually how much he can gain from reading this particular book, he says. So that helped me. And apart from that, actually, it is a self-proclaimed masterpiece. He says this is the best book.
I'm not sure if Ranjini and Nidhi know about it. I'm not sure if you're on the newsletter. So there is a book which is called as the East of Eden Letters. Did you see that, Nidhi? I'm not sure if you saw the post on. You saw it, right?
I saw the post. Yeah.
So in which
I really liked the book.
So he writes these letters to his editor, to whom in fact the book is also East of Eden is dedicated to. So every morning he used to start with a letter to the editor on the left side of the book of the notebook, and then as he keeps writing the letter, whenever he feels like he just stops over there and he jumps to the novel and he starts writing the manuscript on the right side of the
Yes.
book. It was really, really
It's,
interesting to
really
read
good,
about it.
actually, very interesting book. And he is Pascal Kovicki. He is the editor's name. To him, he
Yes.
writes like dear Pat, like that.
Yeah, Pat, correct.
That is the thing. I like
Yeah.
this book, and I must thank you for having opened that. Otherwise, I would have definitely missed, because I never come across a writer writing about his own book parallelly.
Correct.
Because this is the first time in literature. I don't know. My knowledge
Yeah.
is limited. This is the first time I found actually the reading has become three-dimensional: book, myself reader, and the writer on the other side. It
Correct,
throws
correct.
a separate light. And I also, when Googled, I found there was one writer, Owen Shears, like that. I will just put it on chat box and I will read out, ma'am.
Sure,
Finally,
sure.
yes, thank you very much. What I
Nice.
found was this particular book, as you observed initially, it can be a resource book for writers like you. I'm not a writer. I stumbled upon authors following lines. I'm putting them actually. Please, then I shall read. Really, this is an
Sure.
experience actually.
Yes, yes. It was really interesting. Really interesting to see all small little things which he talks about, like you know, it's raining, the kids are playing, they are disturbing me.
And he speaks of pencils. He doesn't want that round pencils also. He wants, and that length should be to that extent. Once the length
Yeah.
of the pencil falls, he will not use them. He will give away to Tom, his son. All those things.
All those things. I also loved how they had just changed their house and he has a new writing room, and he's very worried that it's too comfortable. Will I be able to write or not in it? You know, so,
Red rug also referred in mail. Red rug and one table, pencil, all those things.
yes,
So
yes.
this is what that particular writer has written actually. I have put in chat box, madam. Kindly others also may
Yes.
follow.
Sure.
This journal of the novel is a book I have kept on every desk. I have written it for the past 10 years.
Oh,
I have rarely opened it when I am not working on a book, and never when I am writing well. But on those days when the engine room of a first draft feels claustrophobic or static, when the words are turned brittle and the whole endeavor seems either pointless or ridiculous, that is when I will reach again for this idiosyncratic one-sided correspondence which comes together to form a rare map of a literary mind at the point of creation. This
very,
is
very
useful.
beautifully said.
Thank you very much.
So beautifully said.
And do you recollect there are two books referred in this book? One, Lee refers one book.
Yeah, in East of Eden, right?
Very correct.
I'm not able to remember the name of the book.
No issue. That book also is my favorite one. I shall strongly recommend reading that.
Oh, okay.
And that is the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, yes. I actually have read the book, but very long back. I read the book because my favorite author, Ryan Holiday, Ryan Holiday very strongly recommended it.
He has got three, 4 books actually. He maintains a bookshop in California somewhere actually. He and his wife. He has got a bookstore actually. Ryan Holiday, I also read it.
Yes.
It is a Stoic philosophy. Stoicism
Stoic
and other
philosophy.
Comes actually. We also have our own friends in Stoicism. This book is basically on Stoicism, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Yes, Meditations by Marcus. Meditations is also a very beautiful read. If any of you are like to read a little bit about philosophy and I can't call it self-help actually.
No, it's not self-help.
Yeah, you can't really call it self-help. It's philosophy, basic Stoic philosophy.
It is an approach towards life, actually.
Yes.
And you can open it randomly. You can open any page and read.
Yeah.
They are
Correct.
very small, actually. This Marcus Aurelius is an emperor. Whenever he was finding time, actually, in battlefront, he used to come back to his tent, write that, and then keep it reserved. Actually, that is how this book was brought out. Day to day, whatever he experienced, whatever wisdom that came to his mind, he has scripted in this book. Actually, this is one book I found. I remembered. Thank you.
There was one more book also which he mentions, right?
I forgot that. I tried to look
at. That is what I forgot.
I have made a mention in the note actually, but I was searching. I could not collect that actually. I know 2 books.
Correct. Yeah, two books. I was thinking of the other one. Meditations didn't strike me. Meditations, when I read it in the book, I thought, yes, oh, okay, they also have mentioned about meditations.
I keep a copy of that book always on my table, actually.
Oh, wow.
I
I'll
really-
share a picture with you of my copy also. It's I also
got
have
it
a very
from-
beautiful copy of the book.
Yes, yes. He's on the horse, actually, he'll be riding the emperor. That book I have, actually.
Oh, very nice.
That
Very
is,
nice.
that is a very good book, actually. I got it from my son in America, actually. He sent it.
Oh, wonderful. I'm a huge fan of Stoic philosophy, at least reading about it.
He's required. So there are Stoicism app and other things are also there.
Correct.
It's good. It keeps up your spirits. That's what I found. When your
Sure.
days are bad.
Exactly. True, true. Very true.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share anything.
Tell me something, as writers, would you write a character who you don't understand at all? Like Steinbeck wrote Kathy, and he doesn't know what motivates her. He doesn't know what she wants from life. Would you think
Yeah.
of writing a character like that?
I doubt it. I don't know whether I'll be able to, maybe it's not right, but you always want to have some justification for evil also, right?
Yeah,
someone
it's
is-
difficult to make it
Yeah.
believable, to make
Yeah.
such a character believable. Yeah.
Correct. In fact, that was one of the criticism of the book, that Kathy's character is so dark and there's no explanation. She, see, if suppose money is what is her motivation to leave her husband and get away, her husband is actually rich. He's quite well off.
Yeah, it's not money.
It's not money. So what is it? Why did she have to leave him, shoot him, in fact, and go off and live the life of a prostitute now?
Maybe
That's
freedom
again,
she wanted, power, freedom.
Yeah.
I thought, as in maybe she felt very claustrophobic in that whole family atmosphere. I
Mhm.
mean, that's how I thought. Again, I'm like shooting in the dark, but
Yeah.
maybe she wanted that ownership and that power. I don't know.
Yeah, that felt, Tulika didn't feel completely justified to me, because it wasn't like he was keeping her at home,
Yeah,
or
right.
he was trying to
Right.
really control her or something.
Absolutely.
She could have had affairs. She could have done what
Yeah,
she
right.
likes. She could have, swindled all this money. She could have done whatever,
Yeah.
He would have, it was easy to do that with
Yeah,
him.
he might
He
have
was
given
not,
everything to her also. He might have
Yeah.
given, he was so.
He
He's
was
not-
ready. He was ready
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, right.
So
You have a point.
why did she do whatever
Correct.
she's done? I just couldn't understand at all. She's I felt, as I finished the book, the reason what I felt was that Steinbeck wanted to show various shades of evilness. Maybe he wanted to show someone who's extremely evil to someone who is maybe like Adam, or not even Adam, like Hamilton, maybe, who is completely good. Who's that
Hamilton was,
total-
completely good.
completely good, even with his children. Even with Adam, I think there are some things which he did which are not really right, though he's good. But with Hamilton, I felt that he's that pure and really lovable,
Yeah.
I don't know, it reminded me of Santa Claus. I don't know for what reason. Maybe because Christmas is coming. Whenever I thought of him, I could imagine him like that. So
Yeah, exactly like that. We can put them on two extremes. One
Yeah.
side is Samuel Hamilton, and the other side is Kathy. And
Yeah.
Kathy is a monstrous character. We don't know. We can't understand. So look at what she has done. Murders her parents through arson, marries Adam Trask and attempts to kill her own unborn children, shoots her husband, murders that what is that brothel owner, and she
Yeah.
becomes victim, uses drugs to control those whores, takes photographs of powerful men and blackmails them. And
doesn't even blackmail them, Shamal Rauji. Even if she blackmails, I can understand. That also she doesn't do. She just keeps it ready for someday when she might want to do it.
Exactly. And that fellow, that caretaker, actually, he gets him eliminated, that caretaker. That Ethel also gets eliminated.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And even Aaron's death, actually, after he knows her mother actually is in such and such position, that spurs to events that end his life. Aaron commits, dies now. He goes and dies. And she also commits suicide. Finally, I felt actually, is it possible? I was wondering whether Kate with lesser monstrosity or less evil could have had the same intense effect on the whole story. I was thinking. Really.
I think it was, but all said and done, it was Kathy who carried the story forward.
One more thing. What was so special about Aaron that finally it got to her? As in, she was so evil. She killed her parents for no reason. They
Correct.
were not mean to her or anything.
She was
Yeah.
punished by her father, some belt or something like that.
Yeah,
Small thing,
some small thing.
Yeah.
When finally Aaron rejects her, that kind of breaks her. I think that's when she.
Yeah.
Aaron looked
I
more
think
like
there
her.
is a scene where she comes to the church or something, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, she
He-
comes to the
yeah.
church. So
Mhm.
she sees him over there and I don't know,
Choir,
something.
in choir, he'll be singing.
Yeah.
He's in the choir. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe, the way he's described, he looks just like her, right? In
Yes.
appearance. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where the connect she feels with him or something. Again, all this, I think we are just trying to justify
right.
the thing.
We are all conjuring up. We don't know
Yeah.
what actually is okay. I tried to read 3-4 times the analysis, but I could not lay my hands in any point.
True.
I have
It
one more
was-
question.
Yes, yes. Please.
Why do you think Lee had no relationship with Aaron? See, he's there with Cal at every step. He's preparing him. He's helping him. But why doesn't he knew everything about Kathy, Kate, whatever? I wondered why he had no relationship with Aaron at all. He never tries to help him or prepare him, or he knows both the children so well. So somehow I felt there was such a disconnect between him and Aaron. There was they had no
Yeah.
relationship. In fact,
Maybe he
Aaron had no
was-
relation. Yeah, tell Suchi, sorry.
No, sorry. I was saying that maybe he was more sympathetic towards Cal because he knew Adam is more favorite. I mean, Aaron is
right.
favorite of Adam.
Adam.
That is why he was more sympathetic towards
Maybe.
Cal. That is the
Right.
reason.
Or maybe he was worried about Cal might mess up. So he was more tuned into him and he didn't realize
Maybe. Yeah, exactly.
that
Yeah, that
Aaron
is-
could also.
Could
maybe.
be. Also, there is one scene in which after Lee leaves the house and, he just goes away for a month or so, right?
Right,
When
to set
he
up his
says, I'm not going to come back, I'm going to stay at
Right.
my bookshelf and all that. So that time the boys have a discussion where I think it's Cal who is a little worried that, what about Lee? What is going to happen, or something like that. And Aaron says he's going to miss us. He's going to come back. Or
Right.
something like that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, he said
Aaron
that.
doesn't sound very worried about that. He's very confident he'll come back later. So
It's not that linked to material things. He
Hmm.
wanted to become a father, religion, things, unsettled type of a character.
correct.
I think what he has done is Kathy is at the one end of the spectrum, like the total dark, and Samuel is the other
Yes,
end of the
yes.
spectrum, total
Right.
white. And normally all the rest of the characters are in the gray zone. Like
They
some
exactly. They add flavor to the story.
Huh.
But for me, Lee is also an important character, madam. I found him wonderful. Lee.
He was so
Yeah.
wise. Lee is my favorite character. Of course,
Thank
Cal
you.
also, but Lee, you're right.
Because he is a cook actually, but even though he is
Hmm.
also a philosopher. That is
And a
good
medical
thing.
man also. He reads up
Ah.
all about average
Yeah.
brain. He knows
Hey,
everything about.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
he's what I found was in this journal, which madam has referred to, he is a philosopher who can cook and a cook who can think.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's a very interesting character and
Yes.
very well written also.
Very well written, very rounded character. That's
Very
what I
rounded
found
character,
with,
right?
he inspires and he pretends that a pidgin accent.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
he's already knowledgeable. He knows several things actually. More knowledgeable are almost equivalent to that Samuel.
Correct.
Though he happens to be a cook.
In fact, it reminded me of Woodhouse's Jeeves,
Right.
also, yeah. Yeah.
And I like how he takes his job. He's so philosophical about it. Like if he says it's a very nice place to be in, to be a server somewhere. You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about.
And And surprisingly, he becomes the father of that Abra at the end. And he gives
Yeah.
away his mother from jewel, he gives away actually.
Yeah, that's very
Correct.
touching.
Very
Yeah.
touching.
It was
Correct.
really touching actually, that scene.
Hmm.
So he has got some sterling qualities. That's what I found with Lee. Samuel and Lee on one side, and others actually they add fella. Kathy are definitely, as you just said, on the other side of the extreme.
Correct. True. That's what I think. He created those characters to show those various shades of good and evil in a person and the various kind of choices that they are making. Probably. Yeah. By the way, what have any of you thought of what we can read for December?
We didn't
No,
think. No,
I
we are
haven't
not
either.
Yeah. I was just thinking maybe because it's the holiday season or something, shall we pick up something by Dickens?
Sure.
Oh, God.
Or I read Tulika's recent post on Instagram about, what is a classic and whether,
Yeah.
again, I think the definition of classic is now
How to
changing a
classify
lot.
classic. Yeah,
Yeah, how to
exactly.
classify a classic.
Let's do a
Exactly.
modern classic. We could do a modern classic.
Yeah,
also.
that's what I wanted to ask. Do you want to do a modern classic?
I'd like that.
Then maybe I'll just check out a few of the modern classics. Do you have any time period in mind, Tulika? Like it should be at least this old?
No, I have. It was just food for thought because even I was wondering. No, for a modern classic there is no time. You won't say it should be 50 years old or 70 years old. That's why
Correct.
it's a modern classic.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just choose a few of the popular ones. I'll put up a post then.
And I cannot suggest. For me, it is a guided reading. You will suggest and I read. Whether Tulika madam or Archana madam, somebody. I don't have much of an idea.
No, even I'm also completely lost. Usually whatever comes is only what is decided by others. So,
But the
and I'm
choices have been
happy.
really good. I was looking
Yeah.
back over the year and I've got to know
Nice.
some really good authors. I've enjoyed a lot.
True.
In fact, I
Same
was
here.
thinking Ishiguro's, you are the one who introduced Remains of the Day. I just finished Clara and the Sun. He's
Oh,
an excellent writer. He's really
yeah.
nice.
Okay. I've been wanting to buy. So Clara and Son is good.
Yeah, it's good. It's really, really
Oh.
good. So,
Fantastic. I'll pick it up.
so you put up the poll.
Yes. Okay. Sure. Done. I'll put it up tomorrow and we'll decide a modern classic then this time. I was thinking of this one also the All the Light We Cannot See. I'm
All the
thinking,
Light We Cannot See. Yeah, I'm good.
you've
with
read
that.
it?
I haven't.
You haven't, right? Okay. So I'm hearing a lot about the book. So maybe we can try it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll choose a few and I'll put it up.
Mhm.
It'll be good fun to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we vote for your choice because East of Eden is excellent.
Yeah. it was good.
I don't remember. Did I choose East of Eden?
You
I don't
did.
remember.
This
I
time
did, is
nobody
it?
suggested anything. It
Oh.
was your choice. So
Okay,
all the
great.
books were yours.
Thankfully, it was good then because I had no idea what it is.
So what made you choose East of Eden over Grapes of Wrath?
Shamal Raoji had finished reading Grapes of Wrath.
Yes,
I remember
I-
now.
But that
So
he
that
said
is why
after.
we chose.
No, Suchi. We
Actually, he
found-
said that in the
after
Old
we
Man
had-
in the Sea. Yeah.
Yeah, right. After we had
Okay.
chosen this one. I
And
was
then
very-
Correct.
after Chicago, of course.
I think we just thought, let's read something from California. I think I don't remember
maybe.
anything else. We just thought about the place. And then I just Googled who are these Californian authors. Sometimes I just look at the bookshelf and I keep seeing what do I have.
Yeah.
Good. Let's see then.
Okay. Great. Nice.
Okay.
Good fun chatting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Ranjini. Bye, Tulika. Bye.
Bye-bye.